Since the outbreak of the global economic crisis, emerging economies have taken a bigger role in the international system. In this second video, we've asked participants of the CIGI-Chatham House workshop on global economic governance in a world of crisis to respond to this phenomenon and what it may mean for the G20 process.
I think the crisis has highlighted a shift in global power, something that was going on anyway, but the crisis has highlighted that when it comes to where are the global capacities, where are the global resources. I'm not sure the crisis necessarily reinforces this shift, because one of the things the crisis may well do is it will make it hard for emerging markets to continue the path of the past 5 to 10 years of export-led growth. We may need to see more domestic consumption, and the pace of economic activity, which was very rapid over the last 10 years for emerging markets, may moderate going forward.
I think that with the crisis, the financial crisis for Brazil, it was very interesting because it was a catalyst for the process of Brazil emerging and really being placed in G20, because the transformation of G7 and G20, this expansion, and Brazil was there. This means the recognition that Brazil, together with other emerging powers, had to gain more prestige, more weight, more power in the decisions of global governance, in the agenda setting. So we have a say, we can contribute to the solutions to those global problems. In our case, we think we are more strong. Maybe we can contribute more on discussions on finance, energy security, environment, climate change, food security, because of our strengths, no? Our credentials. We are economic power, recognized ninth place in the world in purchasing power parity. We have a very clean matrix, energy matrix, so it's also important. Recently we discovered oil revenues in Brazil, so we have a lot of credentials, also regional. Our influence is gaining strength in the South America, and diplomatic skills, I think, recognized also.
Bridging function is very important, and I think most probably most explicitly, Korea, of course, has talked about this bridging function. The bridging function between the developing world, the OECD, the non-OECD countries, and of course Korea has certainly moved up the charts. This sort of one, poor country that has graduated into the OECD. And of course this is important. If Korea can play that bridging role in a skillful and ongoing way, I think it's going to open up other countries who want to play that same sort of role, which I think will support the G20 activity.
Yes, I think to some extent, China can play a role of bridging, okay, between the developing countries and the developed countries. So I think there is, I think the G20 will be very important as the grouping in the global governance. I think China has a great expectation, should be on that. Okay, so I think there will be the G20 can do a lot of things. Okay, one of the most important functions is to get the global governance structure better represented, especially there's the increasing of the voice and representation of the developing world. So I think China, and the other emerging economies, can do a lot of that. So I think with more accommodation, compromise with each other, I think we will have a more evenly developed world, more harmonious world.
It certainly does play a bridging role, and I think its role is by and large understood but also respected amongst its African peers. Of course, there's some resentments. Should South Africa be representing an entire continent with more than 50 countries on it? That's an open question. The flip side of that is, if you were to bring in another African country, would it be able to do a better job? And I don't think so, not by quite some measure of margin, and that's just because of South Africa's economic weight, its relatively diversified economy, and so on. The only other contenders one could think of immediately would be Nigeria as the obvious one, but Nigeria is embroiled in its own domestic, very serious political problems, and it's also an oil exporter. That's basically what it does. Egypt is the other candidate that's often spoken of. There are question marks whether Egypt is truly an African country or is it an Arab country. So you've got those kinds of issues as well. But in terms of the middle power role, the bridging role, South Africa took the initiative to set up a grouping called the G10, which meets before all the major G20 summits. And it includes institutions like NEPAD, like the African Union, the African Development Bank, and then the key economies across the continent, where they discuss all the issues on the G20 agenda. And it was South Africa that took the initiative to set that up. I'm not aware of, but then I haven't looked into this, of any other similar groupings in other regions. So I think it's to be commended that South Africa does that. How seriously it takes those issues? Well, I think they are taken seriously. If I look at the core of position papers that I've seen coming out of the Treasury in particular, which tends to lead on these issues, it takes that agenda very seriously indeed. And in fact, the bulk of the positions that South Africa is putting forward relate to Bretton Woods institution reforms, which are in South Africa's interest to some extent, but particularly in the broader African interest.
Well, I think if we look at on this process, if you're talking about Asia, then India, China, and Indonesia perform as the three countries as fastest growth during the global financial crisis. And also the role of this country is also very important, not only related to the economic issue, but also to the issue of climate change. We organized this COP meeting in Bali a couple of years ago, and also the finance minister meeting. The idea is, the issue of climate change is real. For a country like us, we are an archipelago. It is a real issue for us that need to be anticipated for that one. And that's the reason why Indonesia has become very active. Because at the end of the day, a country who suffers from this issue of climate change is the poor country and the middle, lower income country like Indonesia. Because if you have a lot of money, then, the anticipation is much easier. But a country like us, it is the poor who will bear the burden. So it's better to take a proactive action. And that's the reason why we've become very active in the issue of climate change.